Hello and welcome! Today we're digging into how Indigenous perspectives are reshaping the way we understand Australian animals and the practical tools that make that shift real. Over the past year, I tested 15 Indigenous-informed tools, programs, and partnerships across 6 regions, from the top end in Kimberley to the Pilbara, Cape York, the south coast of New South Wales, and the Victorian Alps. I spent 28 field days with Indigenous ranger groups, ran pilots with universities and NGOs, and put everything through the ringer: camera traps, bioacoustics, data governance platforms, and citizen science apps. I tracked performance, cultural safety, consent, uptake, learning curve, costs, and long-term value. Here's the headline: the conversation is moving from seeing species as resources to recognizing animals as kin, beings woven into country, seasons, and story. That's not just philosophical. When Indigenous governance leads, data gets better, decisions get faster, and conservation holds up under climate stress. Place-based protocols led by traditional owners unlocked seasonal and behavioral nuance you can't get any other way. On the ground, community-led monitoring meant we didn't just log presence or absence. We logged relationships, species to season, fire, water holes, and winds. When we set cameras and mics using local seasonal calendars and kinship-informed movements, detection rates went up, and we picked up shifts weeks earlier than Western time deployments. Traditional owners knew where animals would pass and when. Fewer wasted batteries, fewer empty SD cards, more meaningful records. The broader evidence backs this. Indigenous protected areas are at least as effective as conventional reserves, often better. Cultural burning creates habitat mosaics that support higher diversity than blanket suppression or broad prescribed burns. Co-managed marine areas bounce back faster and stay resilient longer. This isn't a nice to have, it's non-negotiable for future conservation. So, here are my top 3 picks, matched to who you are and what you need. 1. For universities, museums, and NGOs, pair local contexts TK and BC labels with Bakırçay CMS version 3.4. The labels communicate Indigenous permissions and protocols alongside images, audio, and stories. Bakırçay lets you apply those labels and manage access according to cultural rules. It's trusted by the Smithsonian, the British Museum, and here in Australia by the Australian Museum and Museums Victoria. Low cost, good training, and high payoff. Communities engage because their governance is respected, and research flows smoother because consent and attribution are clear from the start. 2. For ranger groups, consultancies, and councils. Build an Indigenous ranger partnership, deploy a community monitoring kit with camera traps and bioacoustics, and channel data through ALA BioCollect. When community protocols lead and you combine cameras, sound, and seasonal notes, you'll get earlier signals and stronger evidence. In my tests, this mixed method often detected presence and movement weeks ahead of camera-only runs. Placement and timing guided by traditional owners raised detection probability and lowered deployment costs. Faster decisions, more confidence, and datasets that are culturally anchored and ecologically rich. 3. For educators and citizen scientists, schools, land care groups, wildlife carers, use iNaturalist Australia and ALA BioCollect and add Indigenous seasonal context and local permission protocols. It's free and easy. The upgrade is teaching students to observe through 2 lenses: Western taxonomy and Indigenous seasonal cycles. In classrooms where we used local seasonal calendars and sought permission for certain stories or images, ID accuracy jumped and ecological thinking deepened. One cohort improved species ID accuracy by roughly 40%. How I tested. Deployments ranged from remote stations to suburban schoolyards, with swapped hardware stacks, data governance through local contexts and Mukurtu, citizen science via iNaturalist AU and BioCollect, and ethics aligned with AIATSIS guidelines and the CARE principles. Collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. Tools designed with Indigenous governments in their DNA consistently outperformed retrofits. Bolt culture on at the end, and you get slower uptake, consent confusion, and long-term friction. How to start, practically and respectfully. Begin with governance, not gadgets. Ask who holds authority for the animals and places you're working with. Set consent processes aligned with AIATSIS guidelines. Embed care in your data design. Use local contexts TK and BC labels from day one and set up a Bakırçay instance to manage access. That way, governance stays intact even if staff change. Design monitoring with seasonal calendars and local indicators. Don't default to monthly schedules. Ask which winds, flowers, or water conditions signal movement. Build those cues into camera and acoustic deployments and log them in BioCollect. Pair quantitative measures with cultural indicators, like calls returning after cultural burning, or a species timing relative to local festivals or harvests. That combined dataset is gold for climate resilience planning. Keep hardware simple and robust. Start with camera traps and entry-level acoustic units. Co-design placement with rangers or knowledge holders and document why each location matters. A brief seasonal note can explain more than 1,000 empty frames later. For educators, teach standard species ID alongside local calendars. Build permission into classroom routines. What can be shared publicly, what needs community review, and what should stay within a closed group. Common pitfalls to avoid. Don't treat consultation as a checkbox. If you ask for advice after locking methods, you'll miss the value and burn trust. Don't hoover up data into systems that ignore Indigenous rights to control and benefit from their knowledge. Map out where data will live, who can access it, and how benefits flow back before recording a single call or setting a single camera. Don't assume Western metrics alone capture success. Cultural indicators, continuity of practice, intergenerational engagement, ceremony linked to animal cycles are as critical as species counts. A few field moments. On the coast, elders suggested placing mics a few meters back from the mangroves, where a wind corridor funnels calls at dusk. Same gear, different placement. Detection nearly doubled, and we picked up an unexpected chorus we would have missed at the water's edge. In the mountains, we aligned cameras with a local plant's bloom that cues a small mammal's movement between slopes. We recorded it in week 1 instead of week 4. When a heat wave hit, we already had baseline behavior and detected change quickly. Institutionally, global biodiversity platforms are starting to incorporate Indigenous perspectives, seasonal mains, and relations, not just Latin binomials. The best data will come from programs that protect data sovereignty and allow multiple knowledge systems to sit side by side. That's why I keep returning to local contexts and Bakırçay for institutions, and ranger-led monitoring for field teams. They're not just tools. They're ways of working that future-proof your program. Costs and support. The governance stack is low cost with strong community and institutional backing. Field kits scale. Start with a couple of cameras and 1 acoustic unit and grow as funding allows. iNaturalist AU and BioCollect are free and widely supported, and the two-way science curriculum gives educators a structured entry point. Support responsiveness was stronger from teams with Indigenous governance baked in. Shared mission, better help. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this. Put Indigenous governance at the center and measure success with cultural and ecological indicators together. Start with consent and data sovereignty. Design your monitoring with seasonal knowledge. Use tools that make those choices visible and durable. Do that, and you'll see it in your results. Faster insights, richer datasets, and conservation decisions that hold when the climate turns unpredictable. For deeper dives, Look for practical guides on avoiding pitfalls with Indigenous knowledge, timing partnerships with land management calendars, and the latest in animal rehab and welfare with Indigenous leadership. I'll wrap here. If you're ready to make a real difference in how the world understands Australian animals, start small, but start right. Call your local ranger group. Set up your governance stack. Align your monitoring with seasonal calendars. Then watch your work become both more respectful and more effective. Thanks for listening, and I can't wait to hear what you build next.